All right, how are you guys doing today?
There's just, yeah, very good, thank you. Very good.
Uh,
Busy as usual, but good busy at that.
yeah, where are both of you guys calling from right now?
I'm based out in Asia at the minute.
Hmm.
The UK is way too cold all year round for me, so I like to sit out in a warmer climate. What
Yeah,
about yourself?
I'm calling from San Francisco right now. Most of our engineering team's also based in SF, and the rest of the teams kind of spread out throughout the world.
Yeah, I'm based in Cape Town in South Africa, and it's 25 to 4 in the afternoon now, so it's a good time,
Hmm.
especially a good time to find out what you guys are up to. And we were actually on a call earlier on with with some guys, and we were just reflecting on how, we're sitting in the middle of a bear market at the moment, but it's interesting to see that there's still so much that's going on in the space, and people are obviously quite down about the fact that the market is where it's at, but you've got guys that are building, and it's really awesome that you're getting this. I mean, obviously you guys are also very busy doing exactly that, and it's great to see that, despite the market depression that's present, things are happening and people are doing stuff.
Yeah, and if anything, I feel like people are doing a lot more cool stuff right now rather than just building honestly pretty showy projects like we were seeing 6 months ago. So I think it's a pretty phenomenal time right now.
Yeah, that is quite reassuring, isn't it? You're not seeing the garbage. The garbage is kind of like left the building, and the guys that endured are still here, and especially if you want money now, you've got to really put a viable, wholesome project on the table before anybody's going to give you any money. So it's really good to see. And then also just the standard of the projects that we're speaking to at the moment, and wanting to cover these projects, it's just next level. It's such a big difference from, say, a year ago to where we are at the moment. It's, like, if anyone was wondering where the crypto was relevant, and especially Web3, well, guess what? I mean, you guys are testimony to that, and there's a whole lot of other projects that are happening that are just really good to see. And we're still here, we're busy, so and we kind of like at the end of it, we need you guys to be busy so that we can be busy. So the ecosystem is functioning at the moment.
Did we manage to get everyone in? I think we did.
Yeah, looks like we're both on. Are you able to speak right now, Dan?
Yeah, we're all here now. Just had some
Awesome.
Twitter Spaces struggles.
Hey, Deedle, welcome, man.
All right. Should we get cracked off? Should we do some intros? You guys want to go first? Just tell us absolutely everything, what your guys' day today is, what the protocol is, where it's heading. We can do some intros off the back of that as well. But yeah, we want to hear from you guys. Everyone's probably a little bit sick of hearing our voices, so go for it.
Awesome. I can go first and speak for a few minutes. So great to meet you, everyone. My name is Jay, and I lead engineering for crypto. So I personally got into crypto back in 2017. At that time, my roommate was going through Binance Launchpad, so we worked on a few different things together. I joined Robinhood afterwards. So I spent almost 4 years over there, where I saw the company 10x. And overall, I would say it was a very educational experience. On one hand, Robinhood was able to do something that no one else has been able to do, which is get retail to start trading derivatives organically. In DeFi, people have been giving people incentives to have retail come and start trading. In TradFi, no one has really been able to do it successfully, and Robinhood did it. Right, so that was really educational. On the other hand, though, I was there for GME, and I don't know if you guys were following along for that, but it was a total mess. It was really bad for the brand, and it caused a lot of customer frustration, and it really highlighted how bad these opaque systems can be. So because of that, last year I was feeling kind of frustrated. So um, my friend Jeff and I, we started just figuring out how we can build something like Robinhood, except build it in a transparent manner. So the specific idea was an on-chain derivatives exchange. So an on-chain derivatives exchange, there's two ways that you can go about approaching it. So we started investigating like what that would look like. Approach number one is building with an AMM. Approach number two is building with an order book. We quickly realized that AMMs don't really work in scale. Each iteration of an AMM becomes closer and closer to an order book, except it's more complex and just generally messier. For example, concentrated liquidity is like an order book with more steps added to it. So then we started investigating what an order book would look like on chain, because candidly, order books are better for perpetuals exchange or derivatives exchange of any kind. They just can't scale on any kind of general purpose chain. They don't scale on Solana. They obviously don't scale on Ethereum, and they're not going to be scaling on Aptos or Sphere or anywhere else either. Because as soon as you have games and NFTs competing for the same block space, DeFi is essentially put on the back burner, and then it just becomes harder to get in your transactions related to, for example, canceling orders on the order book. And we saw this most notably with Solana. Solana was originally geared to be a chain for DeFi. Serum was able to get started on Solana, and it ran into a bunch of issues ever since Solana started to focus on games and NFTs. Market makers became pretty frustrated with it as well because they weren't able to, for example, cancel their orders, and then they would get picked off from other market makers like Jump that were running their own validators that were able to propose transactions, which a lot of other players weren't able to do as easily. So because of that, market makers and developers got pretty frustrated with Serum and are moving to other ecosystems as well now. So because of this general dynamic, we realized that there's a massive opportunity to just make good order book infrastructure, right? So we stopped building a DEX and we started purely on making this order book infrastructure scalable and usable by other teams. And we kind of started doing that earlier this year. So if you think about it, like most L1s, they follow a barbell distribution. Either they're extremely general purpose like Ethereum or Solana, or they're very application specific like Cosmos and UIDX v4. Sei is exploring the middle of this distribution, this kind of unexplored, more DeFi specific design space. So it's letting us just explore a lot of brand new design space area, especially related to order book design. And the really nice thing about building an order book into the chain itself, which is what Sei is, it's an L1 order book with it's an L1 chain with a built-in central limit order book. It gives us complete customizability over the entire stack, and it unlocks entirely new order book design space. So it lets us improve order book performance a lot. We can solve MEV. We can create better user experiences for market makers and users. And like some small examples would be like letting market makers bundle multiple orders into one transaction so they can save on gas costs, or letting users pay gas fees in multiple currencies. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of it at a high level. At this point, we're the fastest chain out there that's built with the Cosmos SDK. On our DevNet, we have 600 millisecond block times. Our internal testnet testing, the fastest we're able to get was actually closer to 300 milliseconds under ideal conditions. From an ecosystem standpoint, we have over 20 teams that are building on top of Sei. And these aren't like completely random teams. A lot of these are really good teams from other ecosystems that are backed by pretty well-known VC firms that are launching instances on Sei as well. So these are teams from Solana, Near, Terra that are building on Sei ahead of the mainnet launch. And from a team standpoint, at this point, we have 18 folks. The engineers are mostly for backgrounds like Robinhood and Databricks. So Tony, for example, he was the fastest person to ever get promoted to staff engineer at Robinhood, where he led clearing. And Phil was leading Kubernetes infra for Databricks before joining Sei. And then we also had folks from the Cosmos side, folks like Dan that had been building the Cosmos ecosystem for a very long time now. And we also have people from traditional finance like Jeff, who worked at Goldman Sachs and Kochu before this.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm Dan. I'm definitely Cosmos OG and kind of an IBC maxi. I really believe in the Cosmos ecosystem and the design of it and how strong IBC is as far as a composability and communication layer for blockchains. And a little bit of my background. I worked in the nonprofit space for the first about 10 years of my career. But the last 5 years, I've been full-time in crypto since kind of middle of 2017. And I've led growth in marketing and communications and helped build communities a lot with different crypto projects. I started the community of Salt Lending back in the day, and I also ran marketing at Block Party, an NFT protocol, an NFT ticketing agency for events. And I also founded Deedle Connects, a PR and marketing agency, and had lots of different crypto clients and helped them build community, build great content, and help kind of like craft a strong narrative. But then the last several years, I've been in the Cosmos. So I was the founder of Exidio, the company building on Sentinel, and was really the face of Sentinel for the past several years since the beginning of 2020. And yeah, when I heard more about Sei and the opportunity to build better infrastructure for DeFi, I was all on board. I've understood kind of the opportunity for improved infrastructure for DeFi for a long time. I was an early user of Serum. I was one of the earliest kind of investors in Serum publicly, in the public rounds, and thought that there's huge potential there. And as Jay mentioned, Serum didn't really fulfill its true potential because of the challenges that it was built on Solana and relying on the Solana chain. And then when NFTs took off on Solana, some of the DeFi protocols that are built on Serum haven't seen the traction that they would that they could benefit from, especially as the chain got congestions. So really excited about building the proper L1 specifically tailored for DeFi applications, especially more advanced types of DeFi applications like derivatives, synthetic assets, sports betting, where you could benefit from order book infrastructure and where you could benefit from shorter block times, faster finality, and trade execution, which will also improve order execution and price discovery. So being able to closer match centralized companies like, for example, within crypto, FTX or Binance that have more advanced financial applications, and also match a lot of the types of innovation that we've seen in financial innovation on Wall Street and other firms, bringing that on chain and having more transparency. Jay was mentioning what happened with GameStop, right, earlier this year, and there was no transparency around what was going on. And that's what inspired Jay to build a blockchain that's focused on better transparency, but creating greater opportunities for financial functions. And, within our space, we saw the credit crunch that happened once Terra went down, and then how that affected Three Arrows Capital, and then that affected centralized lenders like Celsius. And what we didn't see is all of the details happening, and if there were any backdoor deals or what was going on. But we did see what was happening on, DeFi protocols like Aave, and liquidations happened as they were designed. So it's a far more fair and transparent system. And so we want to be able to bring not only just AMMs and basic trading into DeFi, but far more advanced financial applications. And with that, you need the DeFi infrastructure, and building an L1 that is optimized for DeFi products, I think is exactly the right route to go.
Awesome. I won't bore people with introductions from us. They probably hear enough from us, but I want to get into the protocol and the network a little bit more. But first, I just want to take a little step back to what Jay was saying, and I've always wondered this myself. How did Robinhood do it? How did they make trading? And I'm pretty sure a large portion of their volume was coming from options, if I'm not mistaken. So how did they kind of cut through to retail? Was it part thanks to kind of everyone being at home looking to kind of spend these funds that they couldn't go out and spend because of the lockdowns and things like that? But is there anything that you guys can kind of take from that and apply it to? Because obviously the majority of your volume is going to come from the big fish, and that's just how it works. That's just like a Pareto rule. But is there anything that you can kind of tap into that you've learned there that could lend itself well to more retail participation and even cutting through further afield to people who haven't actually explored the whole crypto on-chain trading space?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that I noticed was this kind of culture of, they kept mentioning obsession, culture of customer obsession. And I think that was to a large extent true. And one of the biggest ways that it manifested itself was making things literally as simple as possible. And I mean, basically the product team would just keep doing different iterations of how you can take a design and make it as simple and easy and elegant for user to use. And an example of this would be options. You're right that options was basically one of the biggest sources of revenue for Robinhood. I don't think it was the biggest source of volume, just because there's more volume coming from stock trading, but there's less margins on stock trading. But yeah, I mean, for something like options, they did a bunch of iteration on how you can take someone that has no clue what options is. You can educate them in a very simple way and then have them start trading immediately. And that's kind of what the options flow is like. So if there's one major takeaway, it's that things should really just be as simple as possible. And I mean, for a trading exchange or any kind of trading interface, right? If you look at a perpetuals exchange right now, there's so much information over there. You have multiple graphs, you have a lot of stuff for example, funding rate, you have all these different numbers that are being shown to you. And a lot of it just doesn't matter for retail. All retail is really going to care about on a perpetuals exchange is being able to select the amount of leverage they want and what direction they want to go in, and then just placing the trade. The rest of the information is just going to scare them away. So I think there's a lot of just normal product design work to be done in DeFi. And specifically for a lot of these derivatives, I don't think we're anywhere close to seeing a Robinhood style approach to any of these trading exchanges yet.
So if you had to kind of think about that, whose job would that be then to like make that as simple as physically possible? Obviously, you guys are building like the infrastructure for that to happen, but obviously you alluded to multiple different projects building on top of the actual network. So is that something that you guys would focus on primarily, or would like projects come in and see a kind of gap in the market to make that interface or usability a lot easier for people? Or is that like kind of, do you share the load in that regard to actually allow that onboarding of wider participation?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So yeah, no, you're definitely right that Sei at Sei, where the blockchain is focused on the infrastructure and providing the best platform for DeFi protocols to build on. So we're not trying to kind of bite off more than we can chew and try to provide the best decentralized exchanges on top of the infrastructure. And I think that is potentially a unique differentiator from us and other blockchains that are kind of trying to do it all. So it'll definitely be incumbent on the DeFi protocols that are building on Sei to think about their user interface, the user experience, and the onboarding process. But we are being very intentional about thinking about how we can make that as seamless as possible. We're in, for example, we're in communication with multiple fiat on-ramps to be able to get users to be able to get access to the Sei token as seamlessly as possible. And then also, Jay can speak to this, but I think that as protocols look to onboard onto Sei, creating that onboarding process as seamless as possible and providing any engineering resources and support to those protocols, especially where it comes to integration and composability, is something that the Sei Labs team is committed to. And then I think probably there's always going to be feedback, and there'll be information from the community or followers of those protocols on how to design their applications so that they can have that kind of viral impact and see that level of success. Like Robinhood is far and away the first application that I think of when I think of stock trading. And it took it from a very niche, thing that like stodgy old white people do on Wall Street to, really a national and global phenomenon. So I think that there's definitely a lot of opportunities to learn from their design space.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just for kind of anyone in the audience who's like, they might be getting slightly confused and they might be just kind of coming to the idea of what application specific chains are. Can you kind of just give us a high level and why that lends itself so well to kind of the technology that you guys are building out, obviously the throughput, transactional times and things like that? Because I've been completely app chain pilled by everyone in the community. There's a few in the chat that have completely turned my head to this. And I think I said to you, Dan, before on a chat when we had a little meeting a couple of weeks back, I was like, I didn't realize the power of all this. And then like looking at a kind of monolithic blockchain to actually support all infrastructure just seems a little bit silly now. So like there's absolutely no way on earth you should be kind of fighting for block space when there's a ridiculous NFT mint happening all at the same time. Like there could be a huge mass liquidation happening on a lender and borrowing platform, and that shouldn't actually have to be happening all in one place. So if you can kind of give us a high level overview of how Cosmos allows application specific chains and why that's like the perfect fit for what you guys are trying to build.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll take this question.
Yeah, you can mention that, Jeff. Jay.
Cool. Sweet. So, I mean, if you look at the existing blockchains out there and you kind of map them on how application specific or general purpose they are, you can see that they generally follow more of a barbell distribution. On one hand, you have the general purpose blockchains, which everyone's familiar with, like Solana and Ethereum. And then on the other side, there's application specific blockchains, which are primarily built for one specific use case. And they do that use case really, really well. And because it's built entirely for that use case, you can add in a bunch of customizations to the chain level that you wouldn't be able to get if you're building on top of a general purpose chain. So the simple way to think about it is if you're building an application specific chain for an order book, and you know that there's Serum on Solana, then it'd basically be like taking Serum on Solana, plugging it onto its own L1 chain, And then from there, you can basically make trade-offs at the chain level. It would be beneficial for Serum, but if these optimizations were being made on Solana, they would be negative for the other Solana apps that are kind of being built. It would be negative for the games and NFTs. So you can make a bunch of custom-made optimizations for your specific use case. So and that's kind of where Sei is at right now. Sei is in the middle of this order book or in the middle of this distribution of chains because we are using an app chain kind of approach. Where we're using the Cosmos SDK to build a general purpose chain, or Cosmos SDK to build a chain with a built-in order book rather than building a general purpose chain. But then this order book can be used by multiple teams for different use cases that are all tied to DeFi. So it's kind of an unexplored design space. With regards to the second part of your question around Cosmos SDK, so the way that the Cosmos SDK works is it's an SDK where they have a bunch of predefined modules you can use. So you can get a chain up and running, a vanilla blockchain, in a very simple manner, rather than what like Solana and Near and Ethereum had to do, where they had to spend multiple years in R&D building the same kind of shared tooling from scratch. So with the Cosmos SDK, all of that stuff just gets abstracted away from you. And you get a vanilla blockchain up and running really, really quickly. And then you can add in whatever customizations you need for your specific use case. So for example, in Sei's use case, there were a few different modules that we added in. The most notable one is a DEX module, which supports an order book. So we built in an order book at the chain level. You're able to make customizations around that. And in general, that's what all these other app-specific chains with the Cosmos SDK are doing as well.
I suppose one of the added benefits of that is obviously the IBC. And like if you look at, I don't know, like what a DYDX is doing, obviously they had benefits of having effectively their own chain because nothing else was really built over there, but they were really isolated with regards to kind of, if you were going over there, you were going over there for one purpose, but you know, there's a lot of shiny things that happen in this space that you need to be able to like build on top of and, I don't know, bridge when you need to. You need those applications to be kind of composable at the same time and be able to route in and out of them as and when. So I think that was where DYDX kind of came up a little bit short because they were kind of isolated in their own segment on their own chain. But that's the beauty of Cosmos for me. It's the idea that even though you have these application specific chains, like the fluidity in and out through the IBC is so perfect for that. Would there be kind of any kind of movements towards composability with other application chains that we could actually build infrastructure in between the two? Is there any kind of ideas around that, or even just kind of give us a high level overview of how the IBC allows that to happen?
Yeah. So one of the really nice things about the Cosmos ecosystem is that there's this, I guess, concept of IBC, inter-blockchain communication. So in other ecosystems, you might need to set up bespoke bridges. So example would be an Ethereum to Solana bridge, where whoever is building the bridge is responsible for kind of making sure that it's a secure bridge. And in the past, bridges have been one of the biggest things that have been exploited. With IBC, you can have a secure and reliable way to transfer data. You can transfer arbitrary data, but one of the biggest use cases is to transfer assets right now. So in a lot of use cases, it ends up being a very secure bridging protocol between Cosmos-enabled and IBC-enabled chains. And yeah, it just lets you securely transfer assets. And at this point, there hasn't been any kind of hack that's happened for an IBC chain yet. Whereas for basically most other flavors of bridges out there, they have been attacked. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits of using IBC right now. Like it's been very, very, very battle tested. And at this point, it is probably the most secure bridge out there. So in Sei's case specifically, that was one of the selling points of using the Cosmos SDK as well. One of the biggest question marks when you're building a new chain becomes how do you bring in liquidity? And if you have IBC enabled, that makes it much, much simpler to onboard liquidity onto your chain. So having people, for example, transfer USDC from other chains is something you can do because IBC is enabled from day one. And I mean, recently we also kind of launched our partnership with Axelar. So we're going to be having people be able to bridge assets from other chains using Axelar, specifically USDC. So yeah, I mean, in Sei's case, we're going to have IBC enabled from day one. We're going to be able to communicate with every other IBC enabled chain in Cosmos. And in the longer term, we're going to be supporting more kind of bridging partners that let us connect with other chains as well, because at the end of the day, like this interoperability is very important for us. The nice thing is that with IBC, there's a lot of very easy interoperability we get. For example, with interchain accounts, we can have queries that start on a host chain. Let's say that host chain is Kujira, for example, and then they're able to execute some kind of logic on us, which would be, they'd be starting off on the controller chain, which would be Kujira, and then they'd be able to execute some kind of logic on our chain, which would be the host chain. So there's a lot of cool ways that we can work together with other teams through interchain accounts and IBC in general.
Yeah, I love that. So question that's kind of in the back of my mind. What's the pros and cons over central limit order book versus an AMM, which a lot of people who've played around, they've seen the first iterations of AMMs, now Uni v3 going to concentrated liquidity, like the Trader Joe's, having a take on that, a little bit more intuitive, I suppose, but people are still kind of diehard AMM, whereas you guys are going for the central limit order book. So what's the kind of pros and cons around that? I personally think that the limit order book's far superior, but obviously it doesn't make a lot of sense for certain types of protocols. So just speak to that if you can.
Yeah, I think that for different types of use cases, order books and AMMs end up being potentially better. So just to be clear, like I'm not a diehard order book maxi saying that order books are the only thing that you should be using. I think that there's pretty good use cases for using AMMs as well. I think there's like some areas where AMMs really do shine. For example, in an environment where you can't be actively updating orders, for example, on Ethereum L1, where gas fees costs are ridiculous, so you can't actually be updating your positions every single block. In a case like that, an AMM ends up being really, really good because you can just perform one transaction to passively put in liquidity, and then afterwards you can just leave your liquidity in the AMM forever, basically. So that ends up being really, really good. The second kind of really nice benefit about AMMs is it works really well for the long tail of assets. So specifically in an order book, you need market makers to come and start making these markets. So they need to be constantly putting in orders that are going to be basically following whatever the market price is. And they need to be putting in the effort of doing this. Whereas if you're just launching a new asset, there's like a few $1,000s of liquidity on this asset. Like market makers aren't really going to be incentivized to be doing that. So then they will, like, it's easier to just put something into an AMM and then people can start trading. And you're not going to run out of any kind of assets to be trading on an AMM. Like they provide infinite liquidity because of the nature of like the constant product curve, assuming you're using a constant product approach. So that makes it much easier to start trading. On the other hand, like there's a reason why traditional finance, the default is to be using an order book. And that's just because it's much simpler. It's much better for market makers. And it allows you to have better, I guess, first of all, there's less slippage that happens with that. There's no impermanent loss. And it lets you be actively updating your positions so that you're not basically reacting to, or you're not getting picked off with your stale order. So like on an AMM, once you put in an order, once the market shifts, that's when someone is essentially going to be buying it. So people are going to be buying your positions as soon as you're already, like those are already like kind of in the red. Whereas in the case of an order book, you can be constantly updating your positions to make sure that you're able to get lose the least possible money. So it ends up being better for market makers to be providing liquidity on an order book.
Okay, yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense. You also don't lose sleep when you're trading on chain that's in AMM, and you can't exactly set stops or anything like that.
Well, and to your point, like Trader Joe and some of these kind of newer models of AMMs, right, trying to concentrate liquidity closer to spot price. What essentially that is doing is just trying to make an AMM closer to an actual order book, because an order book is actually being able to put up your bids and find price discovery more organically based on bids and asks, and it and has better order execution, as Jay was mentioning, and less slippage. And I think AMMs are better designed for the cases that Jay mentioned, where there's high gas costs or there are long tail of assets. But for larger assets where you want better trade execution, and Jay mentioned that's why traditional finance has run on central limit order books for the past 40 plus years. AMMs are trying to morph themselves into more of a central limit order book style, and I think that there's no coincidence that that's happening.